Assalamu alaikum friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you all are doing well. In today's lecture we are going to learn the movement across the cell membrane. There are three different types of materials cross the cell membrane. Number 1 is water, number 2 is small molecule, and number 3 is large molecule. So these three molecules have different criteria, they have different passage, they have different procedure in which they have to follow, and they will cross the cell membrane in this way. So let's start. There are two types of the movement across the cell membrane. Number 1 is active transport and number 2 is passive transport. First we will learn about passive transport. There are two different types of passive transportation. Number 1 is by simple diffusion and number 2 is facilitated diffusion. Now what is meant by passive transport and what is meant by active transport? So you must have to watch this video till the end. First we will talk about passive transportation. In passive transportation, number 1 process is simple diffusion and number 2 is osmosis. There are two types of the diffusion. Number 1 is simple diffusion and number 2 is facilitated diffusion. What happened in the simple diffusion? Let's talk about the simple diffusion. Alright. Simple diffusion means the movement of particle from the higher concentration to the lower concentration without any agent. Simple diffusion is happen in the small molecules. They can easily diffuse across the cell membrane. So they don't need any kind of agent, they don't need any kind of protein which they help them to cross the cell membrane. As you can see on my screen, there are three diagrams, 1, 2 and number 3. This section is cell membrane. Alright, this is the cell membrane. First of all, look at picture number 1. This is the inner side of the cell and this is the outer side of the cell membrane. Now the concentration of the molecules outside the cell membrane is higher as compared to the inner side of the cell. So we know that we have learned the definition of diffusion, that the movement particles from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. So this is the higher concentration. Outside there is a higher concentration of the molecules. So molecules will move from the higher concentration towards the lower concentration. So in this way molecules will cross the cell membrane and they will move to the inner side of the cell. Look at picture number 2. One molecule enter in the cell. Look at picture number 3. There are same amount of molecules at the outside of the cell as well as at the inside of the cell. So this condition is called equilibrium. Both sides, inner and outer, both sides have equal amount of molecules. So simple diffusion means the movement of particles from the higher concentration towards the lower concentration without any agent, without any protein. Molecules will keep towards the lower concentration until they will not reach at the equilibrium condition. So molecules will keep going at the inside of the cell until at the both side of the cells will not be at the equilibrium condition. This is called simple diffusion. Now let's talk about second type of diffusion, which is facilitated diffusion. What happened in the facilitated diffusion? Have a look at this diagram. This is a type of the diffusion, but why do we say it as facilitated diffusion? It is the same as the diffusion, the simple diffusion, but one thing is different in facilitated diffusion. The movement of the particles from the higher concentration towards the lower concentration by an agent or using a protein. So facilitated means something is going to facilitate the molecules to reaches them to the other position. So who is that? Protein. Proteins gives the path. Proteins are the agent which gives the path of those molecules, so they will easily enter or go out from the cell. This is called facilitated diffusion. Diffusion means the concentration of the molecules from the higher towards the lower concentration. Alright. In simple, they don't need any kind of agent, they don't need any protein, but in facilitated diffusion they need protein. Without protein they cannot move. This is the main thing in facilitated diffusion, that protein must have to be used to take that molecules from the higher concentrated area towards the lower concentrated area. So this is mandatory in the facilitated diffusion. Look at picture number 1 and picture number 2. Let me label picture number 1, picture number 2. In picture number 1, diffusion by channel protein. These two are proteins. Alright, and this is a plasma membrane or cell membrane. So these two proteins, the purple one, these two proteins give the path of these molecules, so they will easily travel from the outside of the cell towards the inner side of the cell. So protein gives them the path. Just because of protein, they easily pass out the cell membrane and they can easily go to the other side. So this is called facilitated diffusion by channel protein. Channel means something giving the path to the molecules, and proteins gives the path to the molecules. So these are channel proteins. Now what happened in the carrier protein? Now let's talk about diffusion by carrier proteins. First of all, protein will bind with the molecules. Proteins will take them from the one side towards the other side. So in carrier proteins means they will take the molecule and they will take them to the other side of the area. So this is the outer area and it has higher concentration of the molecule, and this is the inner area. It doesn't have that much amount of the molecules. So the purple one or proteins or carrier proteins will make the bond with these molecules. They will take them from the higher concentration towards the lower concentration. This is called facilitated diffusion. So let me tell you again the definition of facilitated diffusion. Molecules are moving from the higher concentrated area towards the lower concentrated area using a protein. And protein can be of two types, channel protein or carrier protein. Channel protein gives only the path of those molecules, so they can easily travel towards that path and they will easily reach the other side. Now we will learn the second type of passive transport. First we already learned diffusion, and there are two types of diffusion, simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion. Now we are going to learn the second type of passive transport, which is osmosis. Let's talk about osmosis. The diffusion of water across the selectively permeable membrane from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. So osmosis is the process in which water is going to be moved from the area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration through selectively permeable membrane. Selectively permeable membrane, they are talking about plasma or cell membrane, because it is selectively permeable membrane, means it allow only few molecules to enter and goes out from the cell. Alright, that is why its name is selectively permeable membrane. What happened in osmosis? Look at the diagram number 1 and number 2. The red one where I have made the box, this is selectively permeable membrane, or you can assume it as a cell membrane or plasma membrane. So the water is going to be moved from the higher concentration to the lower concentration by selectively permeable membrane. Water is travel from an area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration through selectively permeable membrane. So look at picture number 2. In picture number 2, water is going to be travel from an area of higher concentration. Number 1 area is higher concentration and number 2 area is lower concentration. So water is going to be moved from area number 1 to area number 2. So area number 1 has a lot of concentration of the water. So water will be moved from one area to another area. So this thing we already learned in the diffusion. Okay, I mean the particles or molecules are travel from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. But why we do not study the osmosis? Why we have to talk about the water in the separate process? Because osmosis process is always used for water. In osmosis, water is the medium, but in diffusion, there are large molecules, there are gases, there are small molecules as well. So osmosis word is usually for the water. So water will be travel from the higher concentration to the lower concentration until they will reach an equilibrium condition. You can see in picture number 1, this is an equilibrium condition. Both of the sides, number 1 and number 2, both of the sides have equal amount of water. This is called equilibrium. So we learn about water in osmosis. In osmosis, water is moved from an area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration through selectively permeable membrane or plasma membrane. Let me explain you one term here with the help of these 3 pictures, that is tonicity. Tonicity is always studied in osmosis. What is meant by tonicity? Tonicity is concentration of solutes in the water inside and outside the cell. And tonicity can be of 3 types. Number 1, it can be isotonic. Number 2, it can be hypertonic. And number 3, it can be hypotonic. Now what is meant by isotonic, hypertonic and hypotonic? Isotonic means the amount of solute and the solvent both are in same ratio inside and outside the cells. Iso means same, the amount of solutes and solvent. Solute means the solid particles or the molecules which are present inside the cells. What is meant by isotonic? Iso means same. Tonic means here they are talking about same amount of solute and solvent. Solute means the solid particles or the solid molecules which are present inside the cells, their ratio are same as the amount of the solutes and solvent present outside the cells. So this stage is called isotonic, means inside and outside the amount of solute and solvent both are in equal ratio. So there is no movement of solute or solvent from the inner or from the outside the cell. This condition is called isotonic. Now let's talk about hypertonic. Hypertonic means the amount of solutes outside the cell is higher than the inner side. Alright, tonic word means solute, okay, and hyper means higher in amount. So the amount of solutes outside the cell are higher in amount as compared to the inner side. But on the other hand, the inner side of the cell has a lot of higher amount of water molecule. So water molecule will move from the inner side of the cell towards the outside. In this way, the cells which are present inside it, those will be squeezed, and this condition is called crenation, because water move out of the cell which shrink the cell, and this condition is called crenation. So we have learned about hypertonic. Hypertonic means the amount of solutes outside the cell is higher in amount as compared to the inner side, but the water molecule at the inner side of the cell is higher in amount. So water will always move from the higher concentration towards the lower concentration, and in this way cell will be shrink and crenation will be formed, and it happen in the red blood cells. Let's talk about hypotonic. Hypertonic means the amount of solutes at the inner side of the cell is less as compared to the outside. So at the outside the water molecule are higher in amount. Okay, so water will move from the higher concentration towards the lower concentration. So in this way cell will be swell up. So when they will swell up, so they will eventually burst. So here we have learned about three types of the tonicity. Number 1 hypertonic, number 2 isotonic, and number 3 hypotonics.